Okay, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Postman's Introduction to the Postman API Network webinar. Super thrilled to be presenting this with you today. Co-presenting, so my name is Nick Tran. I head up marketing for Postman. My Twitter handle is TranManJo. Co-presenting with me is Joyce Lin and her dog. Joyce is
Hi, everyone.
Yes, Joyce is our Director of Developer Relations here at Postman. All right, a couple housekeeping items to be aware of. All attendees are muted, so shout all that you want at me or Joyce. We won't be able to hear you. If you have if you have a question to ask us, definitely do that in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar controls. We get this question asked a lot. Yes, the recording will be shared after this session, and you'll get that via an email in a day or two from now. And then lastly, there'll be a brief survey asking you about what you thought of this webinar. We'll also be doing a random drawing for an Amazon gift card for all those that respond. So definitely hang around for that. Okay, back to the webinar. So the agenda for this webinar is, or basically there's 4 parts to it. We're going to give you an overview of why we have a Postman API network. What is this thing? Secondly, we're going to share with you how to leverage the public API network, and then how to leverage the private API network. The two mix amongst all of that is a demo by Joyce, and I'm totally looking forward to seeing the demo because I haven't seen it myself. And then we'll wrap it up with a sneak peek at what's coming. All right. So let's go. So there's just been a huge explosion in the number of APIs. I would say over the past 20 years. And some of you might have seen this slide before in the past webinar. So I'll quickly summarize this and power through to the meat of the presentation. But it's worth understanding how we got here. So what we've seen is that basically the explosion of the number of APIs was due to basically 3 shifts that we saw over the past 20 or so years. Starting with a shift from the consumer standpoint, where we were all once on desktops and laptops, and now we're all on mobile devices. And on those mobile devices, all of our apps the ones that are connected are all powered by web services APIs. The second shift that we saw was this architectural shift from monolith to microservices. All the cool kids are doing microservices nowadays, so this is definitely a trend that we're seeing. And then lastly, there's been this shift from an infrastructure standpoint where companies, individual developers are moving from on-prem to the cloud, where they get unlimited, basically compute power and storage. So when we talk about APIs, it's important to note that not all APIs are the same. In this presentation, we'll focus on public and private APIs. There are partner APIs as well, but we won't touch upon that in this webinar. So public APIs, of course, are APIs that are available to anyone. Google Maps API, the Yelp API, the Zillow API. With these services, you can go register them, get a key, and start using those APIs right away. Private APIs, we are actually all using private APIs in the companies that we work at. I think many of us don't call them private APIs, we just call them our company's APIs, but they are everywhere. As a matter of fact, we know that there are more private APIs than public APIs. Okay, So when we spoke to API users, we basically found two classes of API users, API producers and API consumers. Along with that, we heard that there were several challenges that each of them face. API producers struggle with building high quality and reliable APIs. And that's because oftentimes API development tools don't work well with one another. Teams typically don't have governance processes in place for API dev. And API information is scattered across a lot of different systems. On the right side, with API consumers, they struggle to use these APIs that get produced. They're difficult to get. It's difficult to onboard with these APIs. Typically, there's poor documentation, and oftentimes they contain a lot of bugs. But to make matters worse, API producers and consumers themselves are disconnected. Sometimes they don't even talk to one another, and I saw that firsthand at several of the companies I used to work at. And then lastly, there's just a general lack of repositories or quality directories that are trusted by both producers and consumers to allow for discovery and adoption of these APIs. So in an API first world, which we've talked about before several times, this fragmented approach doesn't work. So to address these challenges, it's important to recognize that there are really two distinct life cycles for producers and consumers. And as you may or may not know, Postman supports both of these life cycles end to end. And API producers can have a seamless and governed API dev process. Consumers can have a really efficient and actually fun way to use APIs. So better yet, at Postman, we believe that things actually work better if you can bridge the gap between producers and consumers. And in our experience, successful APIs and API businesses are able to create, when they're able to create a healthy partnership, successful APIs and API businesses arise basically when there's a healthy symbiotic relationship between producers and consumers. Which takes us to, of course, the Postman API platform, which allows you to build better APIs as well as making consuming APIs fun and easy. So one important part of the platform that everyone should be familiar with, especially after attending this webinar, is the API network. And so what is this API network thing, and what is the point of this webinar? The API network is the central place to discover, explore, and share your APIs. For producers, they get to create and share their APIs on this directory to drive API adoption. And consumers can use it to search for specific APIs or just discover new APIs that might be interesting. So the API network consists of two parts. A public API network and a private API network that map to really the two different types of APIs that we covered earlier. The public API network naturally is for public APIs, and what it is a directory again of thousands of APIs across a multitude of categories. API consumers can access this directory, which has more than 2,500 APIs to date across a whole bunch of different categories like cloud, financial services, healthcare services, mobile services, all the services. And API producers, for you, it's a great place for you to drive adoption and promote your APIs, because Postman as a community has over 12 million developers and counting. And we have, and having your collections and templates hosted here just gives you access to this really large and active community. But just don't take it from me. Oh, here's this is a slide I didn't expect, but that's okay. Skip that in a sec. We'll go back to that in a little bit. But don't just take it from me. Here are two examples from API providers that share why they rely on the API network. Anthony Dombrowski from Ping Identity says, Ping Identity uses the Postman API network to get our APIs into the hands of developers. So we can easily publish documentation and collections, and developers have an easy way to look us up and get started with our APIs. Marcel Rivas from Dropbox is quoted. The key dimensions to measure the quality of open APIs are availability, completeness, documentation, consistency, stability, tooling, and adoption. The Postman API network is an amazing tool to make your API available to millions of developers to increase adoption and enhance your feedback loop. So beyond that, we've actually have over 500,000 orgs using Postman. And here's a sampling of actually other companies that utilize the API network today. I'm sure you're familiar with some of these. So we talked about the public API network. Let's move on to talking about the private API network. So the private API network naturally is for your private APIs, the ones that you have within your organization. This is particularly exciting for us because private APIs are just everywhere, and as I mentioned earlier, the majority of APIs produced today are for internal consumption, and there hasn't been a good way for companies and teams to really leverage them effectively. So to address that, we have this thing called the Private API Network, which we recently launched a couple of weeks ago. So the Private API Network allows you to take advantage of all these internal APIs that have been created by your organization, by your team. It really acts as a single source of truth for your for these internal APIs, and helps foster collaboration and productivity across your department. So with the Private API Network for consumers, you get access to all the APIs that are approved by your organization, that have been shared on the network. And each of these APIs is listed with descriptions, versions, and I'll remove this box right here, and documentation to make it easy for consumers to understand and start using the APIs today. Producers, on the other hand, now have this central place to share and drive adoption of their internal APIs. They can choose the version that they want to get published on the network, and it allows them to have governance around the APIs. This was released a couple weeks ago. It's new. Definitely go and check it out. All right. Well, enough talking from me. Now I want to transition it over to Joyce, where she's going to give us a test drive of the API network.
Thanks, Nick. I've seen those slides too. I work at Postman. Clearly, I've seen those slides, and I like hearing them again. I feel like API first is a common thread that a lot of our webinars have. And I mean, you did a great job of explaining the ecosystem. And then I'm going to take you on a tactical tour. Hopefully you see Postman on my screen. We'll see tactically what the API network looks like. But sometimes it takes that tactical juxtaposition with like these meaty concepts of API first to really understand what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to show you the API network that Nick just told us about. So imagine that you're designing an API. So we're talking about the producer lifecycle now that Nick mentioned. So on your team, there's engineers, there's testers, there's a bunch of people who are working on the API. People aren't really sure what they're building. What are they building? What version are we on? Are they working on the right version? So how do you establish a single source of truth for your APIs? So here I am in Postman, and I am going to move this Zoom bar. How do I move Zoom bar? Okay. And Nick, I'm going to move your head too. Okay, there. Okay, so hopefully you see Postman, and I'm here in a team workspace because I'm collaborating with my teammates. And everyone's familiar with this collections tab. This is where they do most of their work and spend most of their time actively building out APIs. But we're going to take a look at this APIs tab that if you've attended our webinars before about API first, then you might know what this is. But if this is new to you, then just take a look. I'm going to go ahead and load up one of my APIs. In Postman, an API specification drives the design and development of your APIs. So here I am, I'm looking at a service called inventory, this specific version. In fact, I'm working on this version, but I'm not ready to show you guys this. So I'm gonna actually roll it back to a previous version. And here's the log of my previous version. So I just rolled back this version. I'm looking at this API, and here I see some metadata about it. Here's an overview if I don't know what the service is, okay? So I'm working on it, but maybe Nick, you haven't seen this version, so you come to the overview to learn a little bit more about it. And there's a lot of stuff on this page, especially if you're new to API specifications. But what I will call your attention to is this tab right across, these tabs right across the top. So we're on overview, we see a little bit about the service, but as we click through, this is the API development lifecycle, the producer lifecycle that Nick was talking about. So under the Define tab, here's our open API. In this case, this is our specification format. These are the rules about how your API will function. And then as I can continue clicking across, now I'm in the develop mode, right? And now I can create mock servers, documentation. Maybe I'm working with server environments for my config. As I continue clicking through, I've developed it. Now I'm ready to deploy. And what do you do before you deploy? You test. So all these different types of tests. And then once you deploy, you have the observability. What's the health? What's the security of your services once they're out in production or in staging or wherever you choose? So a lot of stuff, and if this is new to you, don't worry about it. Just look at this API producer lifecycle. Okay, so all of these are all entities. These are all collections, actually, behind the scenes. All of these resources are generated from this open API specification. And in fact, they're bounded by this specification. So I've described the rules. This is how I govern the API as it's being developed, as it's being tested. And here you have these, under each of these tabs, you have this column here that says validation. So there's actually a lot. I won't go tactically into it, but some of this stuff has come out recently and we just keep coming out with more stuff. These are validation checkpoints to make sure that you're governing, that you're adhering to the rules that you've defined under Define tab. Okay. So as I continue making changes, I've invited my coworker to start working with me, my teammates to start developing, to start testing. How do I control who is doing what? So if I go to this ellipses and look at the overflow menu, I see manage roles. So by default, everyone, Nick, you could come here and look at the service, but I don't quite trust you to make these adjustments, but I trust Arla Meow. So Arla Meow, I've given editor role. So this is how you can control who is doing what with your service. And then you saw me at the very beginning of this tab, roll this back to a previous version. So this is how I can, all the resources that I've spun off of this specification is bound by this version. And this is how I can explicitly roll out changes so that potential consumers aren't, their code isn't stomped by what I'm rolling out, explicit versioning. Okay, so in Postman, APIs are the single source of truth for the design and development of your API. And just like for collections, they have versioning, they have version control. I didn't even talk about source control, but that's here if you wanna link what's living in Postman to your source control. And there's role-based access control, not allowing certain people to futz around with your API. Okay, so there's lots of ways to make sure that you're not breaking other people's stuff. And now, the title of this webinar is called API Network. How can you share this API with the rest of your team? So my teammates are coming here to Union Fashion. This is a team workspace. They can come and look at all the services that I've built out associated with Union Fashion. But this is my small team. How do I share it with the rest of the organization? So if I go back to this overview tab and I'm looking at these versions, so I'm still working on version 1.2.1, but these are the previous versions that I've previously shared and added to the network. And in fact, you can see it because here's this icon, and it's the private network because there's a lock. So I'm not sharing it to the world. I'm just sharing it with my organization. And I click this flyout, and of course it opened on a different tab. So I'm going to drag this down here. So now you can see I'm in Chrome browser. I'm logged in. This is a private view. Nick, you have access to this as well. This is a private view, and I can see this looks very much like the overview page, right? And in fact, if I click open in Builder, there's this whole flow that is the API producer lifecycle: define, develop, test, observe, yada, yada. Okay, so what I want to look at, this is inventory service. I'm working on it. I know about it. What else is out there? So I'm going to click this breadcrumb. And here I'm in the private network. You can see this lock here. This is all the services associated with my organization. So is there an API out here that I can use? Is there something similar so I can clone it? Or do I need to start from scratch because nothing else exists? So I can go ahead and be like, I am working on inventory service, right? But I think I'm going to do a mobile client. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and search for mobile. And yes, there is a mobile service that does payments, but I don't want payments. I want something more on the business side. So maybe I'm like, type in business. Okay, so this isn't quite what I want, but I've at least searched my entire organization to see if something out there exists. And now I can begin spinning up a new service. Okay, so that's the single source of truth. This is what Nick is talking about when he's saying private API network. This is a listing of all your organization's APIs, as well as those resources that are associated with those APIs. So that's how you build, design, test your APIs. How do you show other people how to use your API? Do you know what I'm going to say, Nick?
No.
It's documentation. So if you're a business manager or developer relations like me, or there's a new title out there called developer experience, if you care about this internally or externally, you're writing documentation, you're explaining to people how to use your API. So let's go back to Postman. Okay. So for documentation, you can either start from scratch from a collection like most people are familiar with, or if you have this API specification, you can actually generate a collection and then create, like in this case, we're turning open API specification into a Postman collection and start from there. So I've already done that. I've already generated a collection. So if you go back to this collections tab, this is the familiar tab that everyone knows about. I'm going to go here. So I have a collection called inventory API documentation. I start it so it shows up at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and load up that first endpoint prototypes. Okay, so like, what is this? I don't even know what this is. So I'm going to read the description. Okay, I can see that I need this type of scope for my access tokens, yada, yada. Okay, here's this metadata. People know about, so the thing is, we don't call this documentation officially, but this is documentation because you're explaining to people how to use the API. Under headers, I see metadata. So people are familiar with this type of API client and the power that Postman has to show somebody else how to do something. So if I go ahead and hit send, I can begin interacting with it right away. So what people might not know about is it's a little bit subtle in the UI, but there's the ability to add more than just machine readable data. There's the ability to add markdown. So in this case, I have required a header with this key value, but I don't really know what it is. So you can go ahead and add markdown to the request, to the parameter in this case, or we just saw the request, or you can add this to the collection or to the folder or whatever. So this is human readable. You're addressing your end user to show them how to use your API. And then besides all that metadata and descriptions, something I like, it's also very subtle in the UI, is examples. So you haven't gotten your access token yet from the dashboard, but here's what the response should look like if you have access. So these are mock responses. And then something that's brand new, I was surprised to see this, but it dropped probably last week, is, so we're familiar with this build and browse toggle down here in the bottom right. Up here, we're on the build mode. It's pencil, I'm editing, I'm working, right? But what's this thing? Here's a little comment, so I can actually start communicating explicitly with my team or with whoever is going to be using this API and communicating with them. Maybe we're building it and we're still hashing it out, or maybe we're trying to tell somebody, here's how you use it. So this inline commenting is pretty neat. In this case, I've added a comment to this value because my coworker Arla Meow is like, what's blue steel? And I can go ahead and add it. So that's this commenting. super, super new. If you haven't seen it, don't worry. Like, just update your app and you'll see it. Okay, so that's brand new. This is documentation. It's not officially our documentation, but you can use it like documentation because people are inside Postman. So how do you share this documentation with other people? So if I go to the collection details, I can see that there's a couple options here. And if I click share, I can share this. So my immediate team is working in Union Fashion Team Workspace, but if there's another team that we're collaborating with, I can go ahead and share this collection over to a separate team workspace so that they have visibility. And Nick, you mentioned this. You talked about the Run and Postman button. Look at how hidden it is, but this is very, very powerful. This is encapsulating this collection and environment, if I want one, into one little piece of code. So it's merging, it's encapsulating the collection and environment, and now I can go ahead and drop this bit of code onto a website. I can drop it onto a developer portal. Or there's just two options. If I'm writing a blog post, here's the markdown version of that encapsulated collection and environment. So it looks a little bit like this, and we'll see it live in action, but the Run and Postman button is so powerful, and a lot of people don't know about it because it's a little bit hidden. So that's the Run and Postman button that Nick was talking about earlier. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Okay, but we haven't even seen the official documentation feature. I've just showed you kind of what's going on inside the Postman app. But if you go back to this collection details page and click view in web, this takes me over to my browser. And once again, you can see I'm logged in. This is a private view. This is the automatically generated web documentation. So what is automatically generated is all the metadata, the URL, the verb, the headers, all the metadata, as well as any human readable markdown that you've added. So this is pretty rad, very popular. I mean, we floated it out there a while back and people have been loving it. And so all the stuff that we added to the Postman app, you can see here, besides the descriptions, besides the comments, you have examples. So for example, if my front end app that I'm building, making these API calls is using Node framework, I can go to this request and create a snippet and plop it into my front end client code, or the examples that I saved to show people, here's what you would get once you get your access token. So this is the viewable web documentation. Accessible, remember, this is private documentation, accessible for people who log in. But now what if you have a public API? Nick, you were talking about that there being private APIs, which I agree, by number are way more popular, like way more of them, but there's also public APIs. So in this case, I'm working for Union Fashion in this example. If I wanted to make inventory API publicly available, I can go ahead and click publish right here. And I can select which version I want. So I can, once again, same thing with versioning in the app with your API, I can version the collection so that I'm not breaking my flow for my developers that are consuming my documentation. I can go ahead and publish it against a sandbox environment if I create one, which is a good practice. Custom domain if you have one verified. And here's our theme. So if anybody knows hex codes, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A. We can update the formatting and the theme for what we want. This is a stylized view of what this will look like. And then the title of this talk is API Network. So once you're publishing this API documentation, you have the option, you can toggle this off if you want, but you can share it to the API network, like the examples ping in Dropbox, or you can add it as a Postman template. So in this case, me as a separate user, I would probably build something cool with inventory API and then share it as a workflow. But if I'm working for Union Fashion and I want to publish API reference, then I can go ahead and add it to the API network. So a lot of different levers that you can pull for more discoverability. The one thing I'll show you on this page is preview team profile. So Union Fashion is it's not a real company, but if we were a real company, we'd have a bio. So Ping is a real company. They have a bio, they have their logo, they have their colors styled and everything. And so this is what my team profile would look like. So you wanna make sure that you fill that out so that you look like a reputable company. So if you go ahead and click, should we publish this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm not gonna, you wanna make sure you select the categories because it's for discoverability. It's almost like SEO for the,
Unpublished though, right?
pardon?
Unpublished, right?
Correct, yeah. So I've added it to the API network and I've published the collection. So now when I click that publish collection link, you can see it's very similar to the private view, but in this case, it's styled differently. If you have a very text-heavy intro, it goes over to single column. And here's that Run in Postman button. So when you generate this documentation, you automatically get this Run in Postman button with the web documentation. So the way a user would come about this page is I'd come here and be like, kicking the tires and seeing what the service is like or solving my problem. And then if I want to use this collection, then I'll just click the Run in Postman button. And then you can either select Postman for web and watch it in Chrome, or in this case, I have Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and I already have it because I literally just published it. I can import it as a copy and start interacting with that service immediately.
Cool.
Okay, so that's documentation, and that's the API network, the public API network. And how do I go? How do I find this? So I'm putzing around in Postman, and I want to find another service, a public service, right? So I'm not satisfied with my internal payments service, so I'm going to go to this new button. And if you tab over to API network, and I can go ahead and look for like, maybe I'm looking for a fintech service. I can look at all the, well, that's not fintech. Maybe I want like an actual payment service. So if I type payment, here's all the different APIs that I can find to handle payments. And I see like a featured label. I can see the amount of views, and I can click through and be like, who is PayPal? I've never heard of them. Okay, it sounds like a legit company. And then here's that Run in Postman button again, and I can pull it in and start interacting with PayPal here. And the featured is actually a label that our team puts on, Nick. It's not like they pay for it. It's not like, oh, I'm not gonna say, it's not like people pay for it. It's that they have very good documentation. Let's look at some of those.
I have to ask, do you accept bribes?
We do not accept bribes. In fact, our bar is quite high for what we will feature. And I'm glad you said those examples earlier, but here's Dropbox. They recently, like we actively work with them. They came to us and they said, how can we make the documentation better? And if I click through, so I can either pull it in and start interacting with Dropbox, but I've never heard of them. So I'm going to go ahead and view their documentation. They did a great job of publishing their documentation. And so very thorough, very easy to get started. I think the other example you mentioned was Ping. Yeah, so let's see what Ping has. So they are another example. Okay, so they have 8, they have products, different ones. And so this first one, let's go ahead and view that documentation because we want to kick the tires before we pull it in. And so this is Ping. They have folders, they have markdown tables, screenshots, or images rather. That's helpful. So it's just explaining to me how to use their APIs. Okay, so that's all I had for you. We talked about APIs, and if you're not familiar with API specifications and it's a new topic, it's really a running theme with API first. It helps drive the design and development of your APIs. And the private network is how you can manage. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to Explore. So the private network, remember, that's only people in your organization can access this. It's how you manage the single source of truth for the API specification, but also all the tests and documentation and all the other collections that you have bound by that specification. And then we talked about API documentation, showing users how to use your API, and specifically the public API network. So this is the web view of the public API network. This is how you can share that documentation and any onboarding workflows that you create with the broader developer community. So for both of the networks, you might be thinking like the private network, the public network, which one is for me? The intent is the same. It's for more visibility and searchability of your APIs. Okay, and Nick, I think you have some more examples of, you're gonna talk a little bit more about the API network?
Yes, actually some upcoming features. Hey,
Oh,
before, I think you're done here, but before you go, can
yeah.
you tell people how to get to explore.postman.com from our homepage?
Yeah, you can go to explore.postman.com or right here in the header, if you go over to the
Well, if
explore.
you're not signed in.
Okay, so if you're at postman.com, this is our homepage. The API network is up here in the top primary navigation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Joyce. I'm going to double down on what this one of our community members said here. Joyce, you are the best. Pretty easy to understand everything that you are presenting. So that came from Vadim. And Debbie, there's a follow-on question. Debbie asked Joyce, how much coffee did you drink this morning?
It's true. So y'all wanted me to keep this demo pretty short, and there is really a lot of features out there that people don't know about, and their faces light up when I tell them about it. So I wanted to cram as much information into the demo portion as possible.
All right. All right, I'm gonna grab control back from you now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks again, Joyce, for that wonderful demo. Moving on, so I briefly mentioned that we're gonna talk about some upcoming new features. So let's go through them. Today, many of you work in your workspace. We call them private workspaces. You collaborate with other team members from within your organization, and that's good and all. But many of you have asked, like, how do I go about collaborating with other people from within the community? So you can do that with public workspaces. This is going to be available in the near future. I can't say when, but this is actually a really big deal. So today, you can work and collaborate with your own people from within your own company. In the very near future, you'll be able to collaborate with anybody from the community. So I'll let that sink in for a second.
A big one. I think it'll take people looking at it and interacting with it to really understand the impact. But that's a big one.
I'm super excited about this. Again, like, it's coming really soon. Can't share when exactly, but it is just right around the corner. Second super cool thing that we're going to be making available for the API network very soon, the public API network, is unified search. You saw Joyce use a search functionality within the application. With unified search, you basically get to search all the elements for that API network listing. You'll be able to search through for templates, API collections, team profiles, anything that has to do with that API network listing, you'll be able to search for. So it's a much improved experience that we have over today. And on the API network front, the private API network front, I know we just made the private API network available. We're now going to introduce a folder structure to allow our customers to have hundreds of internal APIs. Yes, many of our customers do have hundreds of APIs. I think some of them actually have thousands. And they've expressed a better way to organize these APIs. And so with folder structure, you'll be able to organize them in a multi-level fashion. And so you'll be able to create a structure that reflects your organization or your workflow needs. Okay, I think that was the end of the webinar. Another one that's coming up that I think you should be aware of is this webinar that's going to be presented by Ken Lane, our Chief Evangelist. It's taking place a week from today. It's called API Governance with Postman. It's super technical. It's great for people building private APIs, well, even public APIs. So definitely check that
Yeah,
out. And I know you, go ahead.
If your ears perked up when we were talking about API specifications or the private API network, definitely check this one out because this is going to be up your alley.
And one of the examples that Joyce referenced earlier from the Ping identity collection, there's going to also be a webinar with Ping. I think it's a month from now that will cover exactly how they went about using Postman to organize all their APIs as well as make it available publicly on the API network. All right, I think it's survey time. So if you get a moment, click on this link here or type in this link, bit.ly/Postman API Network to fill out the survey. Tell us how we did, you know, give us feedback on the product as well. And for those that respond to the survey, you'll be entered into a random drawing to win an Amazon gift card. We're getting some questions coming in, and I see that like some people have posted their questions in chat. Our ask of all of you is to post your questions on the Q&A functionality, which is 2 chat bubbles in your Zoom control panel. So why don't you take a moment to if you have questions, definitely post it there. And then for the rest of you, start filling out the survey. There was a question earlier about like, are we going to make the presentation recording available and how soon? I said 1 to 2 days. I'm going to amend myself. Usually takes us several days to make the recording available. And someone asked about the recording from last week's webinar. That will be made available very soon.
Yeah, should we start answering the questions?
Yes, let's move on to Q&A. All right. Okay, first question. I'll start with a super easy one. Can a private API be shared with a vendor outside of our company, not just internally to our company? So I discussed public APIs and private APIs. I referenced partner APIs in that there's partner APIs that exist as well. We didn't cover them. We don't have that functionality yet. But private APIs, though, to answer your question, are private to your organization, and they can only be shared with other people within your company.
Yeah, there's ways to share your API, but the private API, Postman is very secure with only allowing the correct people to access. So there are ways to share, but just not secure ways, right? So yes, it's coming.
A similar question here, private and public, how about collaboration between companies with an access list? Okay. Another question, would you touch upon why anyone would post their private APIs on Postman Network? I understand it fosters collaboration, but could it not be achieved by other means? What's the compelling reason to post them on the Postman API network?
Yeah, this is one where ideally, yes, there are other ways to collaborate, but the way a lot of engineering organizations run is that not everyone has access to all the code or all the systems available. So you might not have access to repos. Like I've talked with developers that just know that a service might be out there, but they just decide to spin up a new service because that's their process. So this is the way we can make it a little bit easier. And a lot of the folks in your organization are probably using Postman. And so sharing it in Postman is the solution that we came up with.
Okay, another question here. I think it will help us do a pseudo public offering. Our business process currently requires requests and approve access before we open up API access to our SaaS product. I'm not sure whether that was a question. Okay.
It's a feature request.
Another question here. Can you please share the video demo for all of this, like a go-through tutorial? So we'll definitely share the recording of this webinar, but will there be a tutorial around this, Joyce?
A go-through tutorial? Yeah, I think we actually have that planned. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
Okay, definitely coming. Another really good question here, and we asked ourselves the same question. We have to double check. Is the private API network a pay-for-service? I'll just take this one. The private API network is available to in free and paid plans. We double checked that yesterday, and that's true.
Yeah, it's for teams, but for free or paid.
Yep. And is either public or private network does it require a subscription level or payment to Postman?
Either public or private. No, it's just for teams, so free or paid. Is that the same question?
Yeah. Well, the question is public and private network.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't cost anything to list on the public network.
I think there's a question that I think you might have missed. Is the splitting in subfolders part of the open API format, or is it post customization? So when you take an open API specification and generate a collection from it, there is a way to read the paths and then generate those folders or nested folders. But there is a little bit of subjectivity to how people want that structured, so you might have to do some post customization.
A new question just came in here. I'll just jump to it. Really great question. So hi, I'm interested in map APIs. Apart from Google, are there any other companies Postman partners with in regards to public APIs? So have you come across any other map APIs on the public API network?
I've been trying to get more mapping APIs into the network. So if you search, if you were to go to the explore.postman.com right now, API network, and search for map, the word map, and see what you come up with, because I want more, like you saw a bunch of payment and fintech APIs. It's very interesting to me. Like we need to break into the mapping market.
Yeah, so I actually asked that question because it's really a call to action here, which are, we have 2,500 APIs in the public API network. We're seeing dozens getting added every week. So if there's an API that you think should be on the public API network, definitely ping us or even ping the company directly. Let's see whether we can get them to list their APIs on the public API network.
And I'm really glad somebody asked that question, because Nick, you're absolutely right. I feel like a lot of the mapping companies have been published in the API network, but if you tab over to templates and search for map, a bunch of community members have created data visualizations. There's a ton of maps, Mapbox, Map API, So under templates, that's the community contributed one. There is mapping API, cool stuff with map APIs, but not like a Google Maps.
Yeah. Hey, related to that, I want to make sure everyone understands this. Like, Joyce, what is the difference between a public API network listing and the APIs that you see, the API collections that you see there, and templates?
So the API network typically is your API reference or your official API documentation. And a company can have templates. And in fact, if they have a getting started workflow or a specific use case for admins to do this special thing, they can create a template. So in my mind, templates are either community contributed or they're workflows. And then APIs are more like reference and documentation.
Great, thanks for that. A couple other questions here. What would you suggest for a single source of truth for documenting legacy APIs, SOAP and REST, that may not include documentation or good comments in the code?
So you can document SOAP and REST APIs in Postman. A lot of people will just take the metadata and publish that documentation without adding any kind of markdown descriptions. I personally think it's not the most useful because I need somebody to tell me explicitly how to use the API. But that's how you build API reference. So Postman supports SOAP, REST, GraphQL, and all that metadata is automatically generated. That's what we call automatically generated. If you want the icing on the cake of the additional markdown descriptions, you add that yourself.
Okay. Another question here, how is Postman different from Swagger, especially for documentation?
Postman supports Swagger version 2, otherwise known, well, also Open API version 3. So you can port those specification formats into Postman to generate your documentation.
Okay. And does Postman validate the company when it says it's that company? Is PayPal the PayPal company, like the official criteria?
In most cases, we verbally talked to them, but I feel like if somebody were to sneak it, we don't have it in place right now. It's mostly community community feedback. Well, that's a terrible way to say it. But for example, if PayPal, that wasn't PayPal, PayPal could come to us and have usurp the. And in fact, sometimes this happens because PayPal is like so huge and they have different teams, and they'll come to us and be like, who published this? And then, collaborate on their end.
Right.
Which somebody asked earlier, like, can't you collaborate offline or with your own mechanisms? And with big enterprise companies, like, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of times they're siloed. And so they have to use Postman staff to pull up information to talk to who they need to talk to on their side.
What's going to be really interesting is when like public workspaces comes out, what these larger companies or these companies, what are they going to do with their API listing, and how are they going to make them available or shareable with the community?
With the broader community and also themselves. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, last question here. There's an option to connect to repos under API Builder. Does this work only with GitHub? Can I sync my APIs build in Postman with Azure DevOps services, my organization repo, and not on the GitHub?
Yeah, the inbuilt functionality right now, because this is what people were asking for, is currently a two-way sync with GitHub. However, there are ways to roll your own solution. And in fact, if somebody on the panel is, we have a very nice blog post by one of our solutions engineers that shows how to build your own two-way sync.
Yeah. Didn't we just release the Bitbucket sync recently?
The Bitbucket I thought was just for a one-way push for the collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all these features are because people are clamoring, and they're saying, I'm using Bitbucket, or we haven't had too many people clamoring and saying, I'm using Azure DevOps services, but please, we have a GitHub issues page. We also have a Trello feature, like public roadmap. So the more input that you give us, the more we can drive the roadmap.
Yeah, I just want to I would say reemphasize that we love hearing from you, whether that's on GitHub or discourse forum or Twitter. Like, definitely give us feedback on the product, what you would like to see, and that helps us prioritize what gets developed. All right, I believe that was the last question. So again, thank you for attending this webinar. Joyce and I actually really enjoyed having this opportunity to present to you. Yeah. And with that, enjoy your day and stay safe.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.